Owney Maden, Broadway, beer, and the making of a legend. Night rain on neon. A rotary phone rings. Jazz horns climb under the hiss of a soda fountain. He could make a nightclub famous with a phone call and make a problem vanish with one too. His money flowed through valves, and valves turned into music. Duke Ellington at midnight. Cab Calloway in full flight. And behind the lights and the brass sat a quiet man who never danced, who never sang, who only counted. Owney Maden, immigrant, gang boss, nightclub king. He learned to turn chaos into revenue and reputation into armor. He outlived the city that made him famous by stepping off the stage before the spotlight could burn him. This is not a story about a hero. It's a story about a system and the man who taught it to pay him. A phone that rings, a siren's blue, a whisper writes what headlines do. To find the king of Broadway's underworld, start where the map is smallest, on a tenement block where boys learn to swing first and ask later. Chapter 1. Early life leads to Hell's Kitchen. He was born Owen Vincent Maden on December 18th, 1891, in Leeds, England. Irish by blood, industrial by birth. The family scraped, the city smoked. In 1903, when he was about 11, his mother crossed the Atlantic with her children and landed in New York, settling in a wedge of Manhattan. The maps called Hell's Kitchen. The name fit. Tenements stacked like crates, docks that never slept, gangs that policed blocks like borders. Owen became Owney. He talked fast, dressed sharp, and learned the two languages the neighborhood respected: speed and nerve. He fell in with the Gophers, an Irish gang whose turf was measured in stoops and bruises. They robbed, they ran protection, they fought with fists, then knives, then bullets. Somewhere in those years, the nickname stuck. The Killer, not because he roared, but because he never did. Violence came out of him like punctuation. A street brawl escalates. Glass breaks. A whistle blows. This was an education in loyalty, in leverage, in how to read a room for trouble. He learned a dress code that would become a signature. Clothes clean, lines sharp, ties precise, shoes that told the room you were careful with everything. The old country had taught him thrift. Hell's Kitchen taught him timing. A boy in boots, a city mean. He learned to disappear while seen. But in a world that awards nerve, the bill comes with interest. Chapter 2. Struggles and failures, blood, prison, and a ledger of loss. The fights that made him feared also made him famous to the wrong people. In 1915, Owney Maden was convicted in connection with a high-profile gang murder, a culmination of turf feuds and old spores, after a decade on streets where revenge was a schedule, not a surprise. The court gave him a long stretch at Sing Sing. Prison changed the weather. The man who ran blocks now ran laps in his head. He stood in lines he didn't control, measured days by a guard's say-so, and absorbed a lesson that would outlast any shiv. Power is not the same as noise. If you want to last, you learn to hide in plain sight. He did the time. He watched men break. He didn't. Sounds of a calendar pages tear. A train winds on rails. A gate clanks open. paroled in 1923 into a country that had just outlawed the one product everybody wanted, liquor. He walked out of the gray into a gold rush. America had closed the bar and opened a market. It needed men who understood supply and territory, who could move liquid without attention and settle arguments without minutes. Owney Maden had a graduate degree in both. He also had scars, pain that never quite left, a reputation that opened some doors and closed others, an instinct to stay near power and away from cameras. He would never be a clown. He would be a clerk with a payroll and a pistol. He paid his debt in iron years, then learned to bill in quieter gears. Prohibition was a door marked opportunity. He stepped through with a brewer's patience and a bookkeeper's pen. Chapter 3, Turning Point. Beer, Broadway, and a phone that always worked. Bootlegging wasn't romance. It was logistics. You needed breweries that could run quiet, trucks that could move at night, routes not drawn on any map, cops who looked elsewhere, and customers who paid on the barrel ad. Owney Maden invested in beer, the steady earner, and built a distribution web that snaked through Manhattan. His brand, widely reported at the time as #1 beer, poured into clubs where white collars loosened and reputations forgot to be careful. But beer is only money until it becomes leverage. In Harlem, an old club reborn under new management became his showcase. The Cotton Club. It was famous for what was on stage. Duke Ellington, later Cab Calloway, the greatest black musicians in America. And infamous for who was allowed to sit at the tables. A whites-only audience in an era that called its prejudice policy. The contradiction wasn't a bug. It was a business model. Music drew the money. The money sold the beer. The beer fed the machine. The Cotton Club band hits. Applause. Glasses clink. A whispered order. Maden's reach ran down Broadway and into back offices. He partnered with nightclub owners like Sherman Billingsley at the Stork Club, offering protection when the word meant exactly what it says in the dictionary. He found pathways into boxing and, according to multiple accounts, placed heavy hands on heavyweight Primo Carnera's rise. He worked with theater, too, backing shows and bending terms when necessary. Mae West's name floated around his circle. So did Arnold Rothstein's, the fixer who turned New York's vices into a thesis and left a vacuum when he was murdered in 1928. Into that vacuum poured men like Maden. The turning point wasn't one day. It was a doctrine. Keep the law at arm's length with generosity and fear. Keep violence off the front page, and if it can't be kept off, then at least write the headline yourself. And if a threat doesn't understand business, if he can't be bought or bound, then break H. A city eats on hidden wheels. He was a boss who avoided the pose. Chapter 4. Rise, the Broadway overlord. Camera shutters. A columnist's typewriter. Car doors thud. Laughter behind a velvet rope. By the late 1920s and early 30s, newspapers called him the overlord of Broadway, a phrase part hype, part map. His rivals understood why. He didn't flash like Legs Diamond. He didn't spray headlines like Mad Dog Call. He built habits, deliveries on time, bills enforced, clubs that stayed open because the door shook hands with the night. The Cotton Club became a national brand. Radio carried its bands to living rooms nationwide. White downtown crowds flocked uptown to watch black excellence filtered through a whites-only door. In the back, beer pipes hummed. Elsewhere, the Stork Club became a power cafeteria for stars and reporters. Its owner, kept safe by a promise only a few men could make and keep. Maden's money spread into sports. Prize fighting was theater with odds. A manager with the right phone list could make a career rise smoother than a right hook. Primo Carnera's march to the heavyweight crown carried the scent of arrangement. In a city that treated fix as a verb, the question wasn't whether, it was price. He was not untouchable. He was ungenerous with access. He gave interviews like ration books, scarce, strategic, never careless. The suit fit. The tie was tidy. The smile was small. If he liked a word, it was business. He stacked his chips where shadows meet and taught the beat to move its feet. And then came a rival who mistook volume for power. Chapter 5. Fights, Battles, and a Phone Booth on 8th Avenue. Vincent, Mad Dog Call, made headlines the way a brick makes waves. Fast, shallow, destructive. He kidnapped, he extorted, he frightened men who prided themselves on not blinking. He demanded protection money and threatened the wrong universe. Dutch Schultz's and Owney Madens. Then, a drive-by, meant for rivals, killed a 5-year-old boy in Harlem. Even a city numb to violence recoiled. On February 8th, 1932, Call took a call in a phone booth at a drugstore on 8th Avenue. What happened next was the speed of a decision. 4 men walked in and emptied their magazines into the glass. The telephone dangled. The newspaper wrote the legend, and the legend pinned the deed on the city's quiet men. Widely repeated in press and later dramatizations is the detail that the phone call on the other end came from Owney Maden himself. Bait, taunt, and signal. Whether that line actually carried his voice is debated. The result is not. Call's war ended in a hail of bullets. Maden's war never made a sound. The drugstore hum fades. A judge's gavel, the scribble of a grand jury clerk. There were other rivals, legs with bright names and short half-lives, bosses who mistook panic for plan. Maden kept his circle small and his calendar clean. When reformers like Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia and prosecutors like Thomas E. Dewey turned New York's light onto vice mid-decade, Maden reread the room as he always had, early and accurately. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He picked the fight that's always won. In a business built on velocity, Owney Maden made the rare move. He slowed down. Chapter 6. Controversies, Criticisms, and the Cost of a System. You can tell the story as swagger, Or you can tell it as a bill. Behind the music and the marble sat a fact sheet the city doesn't put on posters. A whites-only door policy at the Cotton Club, while Black Genius sold the tickets. Extortion called protection. Elections leaned by envelopes. Union men who learned that a contract is a conversation with teeth. Critics, then and now, see Maden as the smiling middleman in a machine that turned vice into veneer. He didn't invent racism. He profited in its arrangement. He didn't write Prohibition. He profited in its contradictions. He didn't create violence. He used it like a thermostat. Turn it down to keep the room comfortable. Turn it up to make a point. There were other controversies with his name on the edges, fixes in fights, threats at clubs, pressure on producers. Much is rumor, some isn't. The truth is practical. A system that depends on one man's phone isn't a system. It's a personality. And personalities fail. Behind the band, a bouncer's hand. Behind the stage, a shadow's plan. The man on the other end of every call decided to let the phone ring elsewhere. Chapter 7. Exit, Hot Springs, Arkansas, and the Art of Vanishing, mid-1930s. New York is changing. Reform in the air. Headlines turning the wrong names into bold print. Owney Maden does what legends rarely do. He leaves. He goes south to Hot Springs, Arkansas, then the quiet capital of a loud business. The resort town ran on gambling, bathhouses, and the polite fiction that rules were suggestions. He married a local woman and invested like he always had in places that hosted risk. He backed clubs, hotels, casinos. People remember him at the Southern Club and later around the Vapors. Dapper, punctual, unsurprised. He wasn't hiding under a rock. He was hiding in a handshake. Hot Springs, pre-crackdown, treated vice like a visitor that paid well. Maden aged there into something like a civic figure. Never official. Always adjacent, perpetually courteous. He golfed. He read. He kept the tie neat and the answers brief. People who knew said he liked to talk about business, as if the word could wash the blood from the past. Sound from hanging. A newspaper folded. A porch swing creaks. He died on April 24th, 1965, in Hot Springs, 73 years old. The New York that birthed his legend barely looked up. The Arkansas that housed his twilight tipped its hat. The obituaries wrote the old name. The killer, the Cotton Club, the phone booth, and then closed the file. Owney Maden outlived a dozen brighter meteors because he learned the oldest trick. Move before the light finds you. He left the stage and kept his skin, but legacies don't vanish. They stain and they shine. They tell us what a city was built on and who paid. Chapter 8. Impact, quotes, and the final ledger. What did he leave behind? 2 columns. On one side, culture. The Cotton Club's broadcasts turned Harlem's sound into America's soundtrack. Duke Ellington's orchestra found a platform that made a nation listen. Cab Calloway's zoot-suited joy burned through speakers into kitchens from Kansas to Queens. Speakeasies learned to look like supper clubs. Supper clubs learned to sell a feeling called New York. On the other side, a bill. The Cotton Club's segregated door is a bruise Harlem still remembers. Protection rackets aren't protection. They're taxes with bruises. The beer wars, however quiet he kept them, were still wars. And the myth of the dapper gentleman gangster, clean tie, cleaner syntax, can lacquer over pain that isn't sin. I'm just a businessman. Context, his stock answer when a reporter asked what he did, a euphemism that hid a world. The phone booth legend, that before the bullets, a voice on the line purred, "Is that you, Vincent?" Context, often told in newspapers and dramatizations of Vincent Call's murder. Authorship unverified, the implication unmistakable. Remember, much of his legend was written by others, columnists, cops, enemies. The record is a fog. The outline is clear. A city sings. A city pays. The ledger keeps the longer gaze. Owney Maden's impact is a caution with a soundtrack. He shows you how systems invite men like him. When laws invent markets, when prejudice prowls with a silk hat, when the thrill of the night makes you forget the cost at dawn, he also shows you the secret that kept him alive. Most power is bookkeeping in a room with a lock. Picture Harlem at midnight. In 1929, brass slicing the smoke. A room in tuxedos and bias-cut gowns. Applause like rain on a tin roof. Under the stage, lines carry beer no one's supposed to drink. In a back office, a calm Nan in a crisp tie checks a list and nods once. Picture a drugstore in daylight. A nickel phone call cut short by the loudest decision silence ever made. Picture a train sliding into Hot Springs. A legend stepping off with 2 suitcases and a plan to end his story where the cameras don't visit. That's his arc. Born in smoke, crowned in neon, retired in steam. A man who learned how to turn vice into venue, noise into notes, and risk into routine. He wasn't the only one. He was the one who wrote the manual others read. Let the last line be the mask he wore. The line he gave reporters when curiosity pushed too hard. A line that explained nothing and everything. I'm just a businessman.